HOA member threatened my family on my ranch I shot when he pointed a gun at my daughter. My name is Eli Carter, and I never thought I'd have to use my firearm outside a hunting blind. But life has a way of forcing your hand, especially when your family's on the line. I run a 110-acre cattle ranch outside Mill Rock, Texas. It's been in my family since 1893. We survived droughts, storms, market crashes, even a wildfire back in '78. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for a woman named Karen Whitlock and her so-called Homeowners Preservation Force. If you've never heard of a fake HOA storming a ranch with rifles and laminated clipboards, count yourself lucky, because mine, it nearly turned into a war zone. I moved back to Mill Rock 4 years ago, after a stint in the Army, 20 years, 4 tours. I'd seen sandstorms in Mosul and back alley gunfights in Kandahar, but I never flinched. I did my job, retired as a major, came home to help my wife Jessie raise our daughter, Sky. The ranch needed fixing. The fencing was old, the barn sagging, but it was ours. And it was quiet until it wasn't. Karen moved into a new development called Valley Pines, 2 miles down the ridge. Big box houses with fancy names like the Homestead Collection and the Reserve at Cotton Ridge. Most of the folks were all right retired engineers, nurses, a few Bay Area transplants looking for country healing. But Karen, she wore a polo shirt with HOA enforcement stitched in bold thread and acted like God handed her the Landes himself. Problem was, Valley Pines wasn't incorporated. They had no legal HOA, just a Facebook page, a bunch of printed flyers, and Karen's mouth. She showed up one day at my gate, clipboard in hand, smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Hi there," she chirped. "I'm Karen Whitlock, Acting Compliance Director for Valley Pines HOA. We're extending coverage into the adjacent zones for safety standardization." I stared. "Lady, you're on private land." She blinked like I'd spoken Latin. "Oh, I know. We're just expanding buffer enforcement. There's been irregularities." She handed me a folded sheet titled Informal Violation Report, Fence Line Degradation and Visual Pollution. My fence? My goddamn fence. I told her where to shove it. She didn't take that kindly. Next week, I found 2 men on ATVs surveying my southern property line, wearing matching vests, HOA logos. One carried a walkie, the other held what looked like a clipboard, but underneath, I saw the edge of a holstered sidearm. I confronted them. "You boys lost." The older one squinted. "Routine land mapping. Sir, HOA compliance standards. You're trespassing. That's your warning." He shrugged. "Ma'am said it was a gray zone. We're just ensuring boundary clarity." I raised my voice. "You've got 30 seconds to turn around or I'm calling the sheriff." They left. That night, I filed a formal complaint, but it didn't stop. They came again. This time, they cut my southern fence line. Not damaged cut. Deliberate, 6 panels down, barbed wire slashed. Jesse found one of our steers wandering the edge of County Road 16. Could have been hit. Could have caused a pileup. Karen left a voicemail that night. "Mr. Carter, your livestock is endangering the public. You've had ample warning. Please consider this your last notice before escalated enforcement." I played the message for Sheriff Rudd the next morning. He shook his head. "They're getting bolder. I've had 3 complaints this week. Problem is, they filed just enough paperwork to look legit. So what can you do?" He sighed. "Not much. Not until something breaks the threshold." Something did, and it shattered everything. It was a Sunday evening when it happened. Jesse was baking cornbread. Sky was doing homework at the kitchen table. I was out near the barn, checking on a generator that had been hiccuping. That's when I heard the dogs bark. And then Sky's scream. I ran. 2 HOA men had entered the front yard. One had a rifle slung, not just carrying slinged, tactical. Karen was behind them, barking orders like a 4-star general. "Secure the front line. The livestock perimeter must be shut down. Use compliance codes if he resists." Sky was crying. Jesse had stepped between her and the armed man. I raised my voice. Back the hell off my property. The one with the rifle lifted it, not aiming, but holding it across his chest in a stance I recognized from years in combat. A ready stance. I warned them once, twice. The third time, the rifle twitched toward my wife. That's when I drew and fired. One shot, center mass. The man dropped. Karen screamed like it was me who trespassed. The crack of my sidearm echoed across the valley like a thunderclap. The man dropped where he stood, still clutching the rifle, eyes wide in shock before he hit the dirt. Jessie screamed. Karen stumbled backward, her laminated badge fluttering to the ground like some sick parody of authority. I didn't move. I kept my weapon trained, low and ready, years of instinct overriding panic. My brain was screaming, but my hands were steady. "Don't move," I said, voice like steel. The second man froze. His hand had gone for his belt, but he never drew. Smart, or maybe just scared. Karen found her voice. You shot him," she shrieked. "He pointed a gun at my daughter." I growled. "You brought armed men onto my land. You call that a violation notice? You're going to prison," she hissed. "No, ma'am," I said. "You are." The deputies arrived 11 minutes later. 11 minutes where I had to keep my family huddled behind me, gun holstered but hands visible, standing in my own yard like a criminal. The HOA thug groaned and bled into my gravel. Jessie applied pressure while I made sure Sky didn't see too much. Sheriff Rudd pulled up fast, lights flashing. He took one look at the scene and immediately called for medical. Karen tried to intercept him, babbling about rogue aggression and civil insurrection. He brushed past her like she was dust on his boots. "Eli," he said, stepping toward me. "Talk to me." He lifted a weapon at my wife. "I fired once. That's it." He looked at the man on the ground, bleeding but alive. Then he turned to Karen. "Who authorized this?" She lifted her chin. "We were enforcing HOA boundary law. Section 12 of You're Not an HOA. Rudd cut in. "And this is not an HOA zone. But we sent the community letters. You can't enforce law with rifles." Karen's voice cracked. "You don't understand. He's hostile. He's always been hostile. He wouldn't follow protocol." "He doesn't have to," Rudd said. And just like that, the spell broke. They arrested her on the spot. Karen was cuffed and stuffed into the back of a cruiser while still screaming legal jargon. She yelled about citizens' authority, paramilitary harassment, and even something about the Constitution being on her side. Her two goons were also taken into custody. The one I shot name was Caleb Reed, was stabilized and airlifted to the nearest trauma center. Turns out he wasn't even licensed to carry. Had a past weapons charge from Nevada. He wasn't HOA. He was a mercenary. Karen had paid him under the table. The story exploded. I mean exploded. The next morning, our ranch road was lined with news vans. Channel 4, Channel 11. Even a reporter from Austin came down with a drone camera. The footage of Karen being cuffed while screaming about ranch violations went viral within 6 hours. The headline, "Fake HOA Leader Organizes Armed Raid on Texas Ranch," shot by veteran in defense of family public sentiment, flipped fast. People had tolerated Karen's antics when it was just flyers and threats. Some even went along with her fake notices to avoid drama. But now she had led an armed group onto private land, put a child in danger, staged an attack like she was running her own rogue government. She wasn't just annoying anymore. She was dangerous. I was cleared within 24 hours. The DA reviewed body cam footage from the deputies, took my statement, and issued a formal ruling use of deadly force in defense of self and others justified under Texas Penal Code, paragraph 932. I wasn't charged, but I wasn't the same. Neither was my daughter. Sky stopped sleeping through the night. She started checking locks, asking if the bad lady could come back. She clung to Jessie like a shadow. I held her one evening while the sun went down over the cattle fields, and she whispered, "Why do people want to hurt us?" I didn't have an easy answer. Because power makes people crazy? Because fear wears badges sometimes? I didn't say any of that. I just said, because they forgot what land means. Karen's fake HOA was dismantled within days. The county issued cease and desist orders for the Facebook group, the flyers, and the fake uniforms. Residents from Valley Pines came forward with stories of coercion, fake fines, even doorbell footage of Karen yelling about neighborhood ordinances that didn't exist. One woman said Karen threatened to call CPS because her kids were playing barefoot in the backyard. A man reported that Karen stood outside his window at night with a flashlight checking for fire code violations. Her house was vandalized 2 days after her arrest. Not by us, we didn't touch her, but by someone angry enough to scrawl, "No one elected you" on her garage door in red paint. She never came back after she made bail. Then came the civil suit. Naomi remembered her, the law student from Austin. She drove up with her mentor, a real-deal civil rights attorney, and offered to represent us pro bono. Not just me, the entire ranching community. Turns out Karen had tried this before in bits and pieces with other landowners, sending enforcement patrols to people who didn't fit her aesthetic standard. She'd created fake maps, forged county documents, even faked HOA bylaws. We filed suit for trespassing, endangerment, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, and we won. The judgment came down 5 months later. Karen was ordered to pay $418,000 in damages across 6 families. Her home was seized, her brokerage license revoked, her reputation ruined. But that wasn't the victory. The victory came one night, 2 weeks after the trial. Sky asked if she could plant sunflowers along the fence. "Why sunflowers?" I asked. She looked up at me and said, "Because they face the light even when it's been dark for a while." We planted them together. The sunflowers started blooming about 6 weeks after we planted them. Sky was the first to notice one morning. Right before school, she ran out barefoot and came back holding a stalk that reached past her shoulder. Her grin was a mile wide. "I named this one Justice," she said. I nodded. "Seems fitting, because that's what was happening now. Justice was growing, even if it took blood and fire to water it. The ranch was different after the incident. Not just quieter, but closer. Before, we were just folks who waved from tractors or nodded at the feed store. After Karen's arrest, something unspoken tied us together like fence wire stretched taut between every ranch gate for 10 miles. Neighbors brought casseroles and extra hay. Jesse started teaching self-defense classes at the church. Roland, the old Vietnam vet from 2 ridges over, showed up one morning and fixed the barn door that took a bullet in the firefight. We didn't ask questions. We just helped. Because now we understood how close we'd all come to losing the land we loved. Karen's followers, what little remained of them, vanished like smoke. Most were just scared people who bought into her authority because she was loud, confident, and carried a clipboard like it was a badge. They weren't evil, just misled. But there were 2 holdouts, a man named Boyd Crane and a woman named Delilah Marks. Both had been part of Karen's so-called HOA enforcement wing. Boyd was the one who helped draft the fake bylaw letters. Delilah had designed the uniform's black polos with gold trim that looked suspiciously like sheriff gear. They weren't done causing trouble. One night, I got a call from Naomi. "You might want to look at this," she said. She sent me a link to a new website, www.hollowpointlandwatch.org. It was a poorly designed WordPress page filled with long-winded rants about land hoarders, sovereign ranchers, and HOA betrayal. My name was listed 3 times. Eli Carter is a known agitator with paramilitary tendencies. I laughed out loud. Then I saw the photo, a shot of me standing near the new tank we'd installed post-Karen, pistol on my hip, Sky beside me. That crossed a line. We traced the domain, registered under Boyd's name, server traced back to a shared workspace in Waco. The sheriff launched a formal warning. The site came down within a week, but the message was clear. Some people never let go of power they think they deserve. A month later, I got an invitation I didn't expect. The mayor of Mill Rock called me in, said the town council was starting a land use advisory board, a real one, officially chartered and elected, and wanted someone to represent the ranching community. "We've never had a voice in these things," he said. "But after what happened with Karen, we figured that's long overdue." I didn't want the job. I wasn't a politician, but Jesse said something that stuck. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be someone they can't ignore anymore. So I said yes. At the first town meeting, I sat at a folding table next to realtors, farmers, and a retired geologist who talked too much about soil density. But when I spoke, everyone listened. I told them what Karen's raid felt like, what it did to my daughter, what could have happened if my shot had landed an inch higher, what it meant to have someone come into your land and act like your gate was just a suggestion. And then I said something I hadn't planned. Freedom isn't just about owning land. It's about being left alone on it. They nodded. They understood. We passed 3 new ordinances that month, a ban on non-governmental enforcement groups presenting as official bodies, a requirement for all HOA organizations to register with the county and provide full charters and leadership rosters, a protection clause for legacy agricultural landholders from annexation or enforcement by adjacent unincorporated communities. The Karen clause, they called it. I didn't fight the name. She earned it. Sky was healing too. Slowly. We let her talk when she was ready. Sometimes at night, she'd ask, "Why did that man have a gun?" or "Did mom cry after?" or "Are we still safe?" I never lied, but I always ended with the truth that grounded us all. We're safe now, because we stood our ground. And then just as life was starting to breathe again, we got a visitor. Not from the press, not from the county, from Karen's daughter. Her name was Marissa, early 30s, nervous, holding a small leather purse in front of her like it could shield her from the past. She asked to speak to me alone. We sat on the porch. Jesse brought us tea and stayed close. But let us talk. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry," Marissa said. "My mom, she lost herself out here." I didn't say anything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. These are the last files she kept. Maps, emails, letters. She was still building something, even after the court case. I flipped through land plots, names, pictures, Delilah, Boyd, even a few others we didn't know about. She wanted to restart in Oklahoma, Marissa whispered. She was recruiting. I looked her dead in the eyes. "Thanks for bringing this. But why now?" She shrugged. "Because if someone doesn't stop people like her early, someone else is going to get hurt. And next time, maybe it won't stop with one shot." I spent the night going through the folder Karen's daughter left me. 54 pages of madness. There were fake security maps drawn in red marker over satellite screenshots of Millrock, HOA target zones, suggested territorial adjustments that included parts of our ranch and 6 other family properties, lists of names, some crossed out, some starred. Boyd Crane and Delilah Marks were circled in blue ink. Next to Boyd's name, Karen had scribbled aggressive, effective, loyal. And beside mine, obstacle, media tool, veteran, dangerous. I stared at the word dangerous for a long time. By morning, I was back at the sheriff's office. Sheriff Rudd sat across from me at the same metal desk where we'd filed the first complaint almost a year ago. He flipped through the folder slowly, his jaw tight. She was recruiting for a second try, he muttered, probably in another county where people hadn't heard her name. She still might. I said, "Someone else might already be." He tapped the table. "I'll pass this to the state AG. We'll open a wider case." And the others, Boyd and Delilah Rudd, leaned back in his chair. Boyd's still here, laying low. Delilah moved somewhere in Arizona, last I heard. But these aren't just HOA nutjobs anymore. These are people who were willing to cross state lines with guns to enforce fake laws. Domestic terrorists. I said, he didn't correct me. We gathered the ranchers. All of us. Over 20 families from Millrock and surrounding towns, some who had never even spoken before. Jesse cooked chili for the group. Sky played with the other kids, laughter echoing from the barn like it hadn't in months. We held the meeting in the hayloft. Naomi dialed in via Zoom. Sheriff Rudd stood by the sliding door, arms crossed. I laid out everything we'd found, the folder, the names, the potential expansion. Roland, gray hair under a battered hat, said what we were all thinking. We beat the fake HOA, but now we're dealing with a cult of control. Sasha, whose land had been threatened with fake fines by Karen, spoke next. They don't care about community. They care about dominance. They think if they scare us enough, we'll hand it all over. But we didn't. I said, and we won't. Heads nodded all around. So we formed a network. Operation Iron Fence, a defensive alliance of ranchers, smallholders, and farmers. No weapons, no uniforms, just shared info, legal support, and communication. We created a secure group message, shared maps of trouble zones, compiled all fake documents and signatures Karen had used in case others tried to replicate them. Naomi offered to help register the network as a formal nonprofit, Rural Boundary Protection League. It wasn't about politics, it was about land. And land means life out here. 2 weeks later, Boyd resurfaced. He was spotted taking pictures of Sasha's property from a distance-long lens, camera, camo jacket, parked 3 ridges over in an old pickup. Roland approached him, didn't yell, didn't threaten, just said, "We know what you're doing, and we're not scared anymore." Boyd didn't come back, but the message got around. I started getting emails from other parts of the state, landowners in East Texas, a retired rancher near El Paso, a Navajo family on the border of New Mexico who'd seen a similar fake Valley Alliance try to dictate fence height and solar panel placement. Karen hadn't started this. She was just one head of the Hydra. The AG's office issued a statewide bulletin, "Be on alert for fraudulent HOA enforcement groups attempting to exert illegal authority in unincorporated zones. Report any instances of fake notices, uniformed patrols without badges, or threats of land seizure." It wasn't enough, but it was something. And then came the surprise. Marissa Karen's daughter returned with one last file, a video. Karen, recorded 3 months before the raid. She sat in her kitchen, lights low, holding a glass of wine and talking into a webcam. They think I'm crazy, but they don't understand. If we don't control the land, they will. The old farmers, the vets, the people with heritage, they don't believe in order. They believe in chaos. I'm trying to save them from themselves. Eli Carter, he's dangerous because he's the one person who won't back down, but he doesn't see the big picture. He thinks this is about fences. It's not. It's about identity. I'll make them listen. Even if I have to scare them first. I couldn't speak for a long time after watching it. Not because I was shocked, but because deep down, I knew. This had never been about property lines. It had always been about fear. Fear of being replaced, erased, outnumbered. Karen wasn't an anomaly. She was a warning. We hosted a town-wide assembly a week later. This time, everybody came. Ranchers, retirees, teachers, Black farmers from just outside the city, a Mexican-American family that had stayed quiet during the HOA nonsense because they feared retaliation. They all came. I played Karen's video. People gasped, cried, clenched fists. Then I stepped forward. This isn't just about my ranch anymore. This is about what kind of valley we want to live in. One where anyone with a clipboard and a loud voice can bully us, or one where we protect each other, no matter what we look like, where we came from, or how long we've been here. The room erupted in applause. Not for me, but for us. The valley hasn't been the same since the day Karen crossed the line. It's been better, not because we wanted a fight, but because when we were forced into one, we didn't back down. And in the fight, we remembered what community is supposed to be. Not rules written on paper, not power held by the loudest voice, but connection, roots, shared ground, eyes that don't look away. After the town assembly, the county took swift action. Using Karen's recordings and the folder Marissa gave me, the state launched a wider investigation into fake enforcement groups across Texas. Within 3 months, 5 more ghost HOAs were disbanded. At least a dozen people faced charges ranging from impersonation to armed trespassing, Boyd Crane disappeared. Delilah Marks was arrested in Arizona for forging permits and impersonating an official during a land dispute. And Karen, she never showed her face in Mill Rock again. We heard through Marissa that she relocated to a rehab facility, not for drugs, for anger management, psychological evaluation, some kind of retreat. I didn't feel sorry, but I didn't feel vengeful either. I just felt done. The Rural Boundary Protection League. Our little resistance turned nonprofit grew faster than we ever expected. Within a year, we had over 300 members across 4 counties: teachers, ranchers, immigrant farmers, first-gen landowners, all standing guard over their land, their stories, their freedom, not with guns, with truth. Sky planted a second row of sunflowers that summer. She called them guardians. They stretched tall, yellow as fire, swaying behind our new reinforced gate. Visitors took pictures. Tourists even asked if they could walk the path of the shooters. I told them no. It wasn't a story to gawk at. It was one to learn from and protect. At the Fall Harvest Festival, we hosted a ceremony. Roland spoke first, then Sasha, then the mayor, and finally me. I stood on the small wooden platform, wearing the same worn boots I'd worn the day of the shooting. I looked out at the families, the folded chairs, the weathered hands of old ranchers and the bright eyes of kids like Sky, and I said, a clipboard doesn't make you right, a vest doesn't make you lawful, and fear doesn't make you in charge. Land is sacred, not because it's perfect, but because we bleed on it, we build on it, and we bury our people in it. If you come for that with hate in your heart, this valley will meet you with roots too deep to pull. The crowd stood, quiet, then clapping, some with tears. Justice wasn't loud that day. It was solid. Sky eventually stopped asking about the man with the gun. She slept easier, ran faster, danced barefoot in the hay again. She still checks the locks sometimes, but now she does it with purpose, not fear. One night, she asked if the sunflowers would always bloom. I said, only if we keep planting them. Karen's story became a cautionary tale. Her name still pops up sometimes on blog posts, podcasts, even the odd true crime segment. They always ask me if I do it differently. If I regret pulling the trigger, I always answer the same. I didn't want to be the one holding the gun. But when a man threatens your wife and daughter in your own yard, you don't hesitate. And when someone uses lies and fear to try and seize what you've spent your life building, you stand your ground. That's not violence. That's protection. That's love, armed with resolve. We built a memorial near the gate, not for the man who bled there, for the moment we almost lost everything. A small stone, etched by hand, reads, "Here." A line was drawn, not in anger, but in truth, not to divide, but to defend. This land is loved. It will not be taken. The fence still stands. So do we. What would you do if someone tried to take what generations before you bled to protect when fear dresses up as law? How do you fight back without becoming what you hate? Share your thoughts below. Let's talk about justice, boundaries, and the real meaning of home.